The Browns, they're putrid. They're the worst team in the NFL.
The season, the 2024 season is over.
Lamar Jackson can't win the playoffs. He'll win a third MVP, though, so that's great.
Drew Sample is the most important piece of the Bengals offense next year.
Go Joe Burrow. He deserves to be MVP. I wish he was the Browns quarterback. Kind of mean that.
If you're looking for the most reactionary, silly, and unserious show on the internet, then you're home. Live from Hamilton, Ohio, it's Off the Bench by Chatterbox Sports on 1410 ESPN Radio.
I promised you this. It is October 2nd, 2024. If Shedeur Sanders is a Cleveland Brown, I'm who-daying it up with all of you. All right? I'm who-daying it up with. I will become a Bengals fan. The second that Shedeur Sanders is drafted to Cleveland, I am a Bengals fan. And I am not. That's not even a joke. I am being 1,000,000%. I will apologize. I will reach out to the Bengals communications department and just have a message relayed to Joe Burrow. I will be sorry for every bad thing I said about you. That is how serious I am. I do not want to deal with the Shedeur noise in Cleveland.
Well, welcome on in. ESPN 1410 Wing AM Chatterbox Sports Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Welcome on in, everybody. It's a very glorious Monday morning because our commanding officer, Justin Kinner, is now a Cincinnati Bengals fan. He reached out to the PR department.
That's right. 1,000,000%.
He reached out to the communications team. He reached out to all the players, I'm pretty sure, the coaching staff. He has a parking spot underneath Paycor Stadium. It's official. He's a Houday Bengals fan, and I'm happy to – well, is he here?
What was the quote? He's going to Houday it up with all the boys?
He's going to Houday it up.
There we go.
I don't know if he's here.
For the first time in a long time, we got a room full of Bengals fans.
Casey, is he here?
You know what? I think he's right there.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh.
You hear that Bengal growling? Mean and angry, here he comes a prowling. Lean and hungry, an offensive brute. Hoo, 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 run past our boot. Hoo, hoo, hoo. And defensively he's rough, tough. Cincinnati Bengals, that's the team we're gonna cheer to victory. Touchdown Bengals, put some points up on that board and win the game for Cincinnati. You got a little bit of time till week 1 to learn that song, Kenner, but we'll get you up to speed.
I'll make sure I download the lyrics, But, yes, we welcome you in Off the Bench, presented by UDF. Justin Kinner, Casey McCollister, Elliot Ruring, and Jacob Tissett. To those who doubted that I would be in studio today, to those who doubted I would even be on the show today, just like the Cincinnati Bengals, a big win.
To face the music.
Literally. That beautiful song.
That's right. The people of Headline, the good office of Headlines over there was looking at us during the middle of that song.
Good.
So.
Yeah, well, we usually try to be respectful. They don't make a lot of noise when we're working.
Yeah, of course. That's right. Of course.
At least it's a short song.
Yeah, if we started hammering things in here, we'd try to keep it down in the quiet level, but we'll see. By the way, Casey, shout out to you for that. That was brilliant. I think that was the best open to a show we've ever had.
Certainly.
We were debating on whether or not to just do cold open and we'll just do straight the clip and then the intro, but then we resolved it. Executive decision by Casey. We did intro, then clip.
And that's why he's the producer extraordinaire.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, you couldn't have done a better intro, you guys. I was not expecting the Houday chant either.
No, it just felt right.
It just felt right.
And
I wanted to shout out especially the one person who made a Twitter account last night. And
we don't know. We couldn't guess.
We know.
We have
How
no
could you
idea
know?
who it could be.
How could you know?
There's only so many people I know that actively use burner accounts on every platform. But to the person who made @KinnerBengalsFan.
That's right.
You can follow that account @KinnerBengalsFan on X.com, the everything app. It's all happening on X. If you want to follow that one, I'm sure you can have that account will most likely be posting all the clips and the reactions during the regular season of Kinner watching our Cincinnati Bengals because he's a Bengals fan.
Our Cincinnati.
All
of
Bengals
us.
fan.
Rumor has it, just had a meeting with Trace when I got in, and he said, now that I'm the biggest Bengals fan on the show, I don't want to bum you out, but your job as host of Chatterbox Bengals slightly on the line. It has to get Craig has to sign off on it first.
That's fair. Look, and I'm willing to give it up. Kinner will be watching all 17 games with you guys next year, streaming live for all the Bengals content, and that's going to be fun. Craig's in the chat now. I didn't shoot him a text this morning, but now that you are officially a Bengals fan, you guys can exchange numbers, and you guys will be working together a bunch.
Have you had a conversation yet with Mel Kiper? Or does that come later? Because I feel like he only gave one team an A+ draft.
That's right.
And that was you guys.
Well, his old team.
Correct. Your old team. That's right. I'm sorry. Because of the tremendous value you got with your new quarterback, which made you a Bengals fan. But I'm wondering, with you guys, you and Mel on complete opposite sides of the aisle there, I wonder if there was any communication there.
Good for Reese Davis, by the way. But
yes,
I mean,
roll tide.
What a wacko. Anyway, by the way, I just got back from Paycor a little bit ago. I was sitting there minding my own business. Burrow walked by, said, "Hey, Joe," and then we just, shook hands and off he went. He didn't give me the time of day.
Did he tell you to get some sacks too?
That's how he greets everybody, apparently.
Yeah.
So.
He looked at you like you were one of the team. You were just a part of the team.
I like to see that our quarterback is an alcoholic. He walks around with the beer in his hand at all times. I mean, I've never felt closer to a quarterback.
70 degrees and sunny on a Friday afternoon. I think it would be a problem if he wasn't having a beer.
That's right.
What a weird draft for everybody. What a weird draft. We're definitely getting into the Bengals draft picks. Our Cincinnati Bengals. We'll get in recapping their 6 draft picks from over the weekend. Obviously, the big headlines coming out of the draft. My former team, the Browns, obviously dominating a lot of those headlines. The prank calls. At what point do prank calls go too far? Did it go too far? We'll discuss that coming up. And then the Cincinnati Reds. We cannot forget them. Usually they dominate the majority of the show, but we'll dive into the Reds later on in the show. But they've won quite a few in a row. They just swept the Rockies.
Maybe we should just keep ignoring them. Get more other things to happen and push them down the list of desires for people to watch on TV and everything like that. It seems like the less people are paying attention to the Reds, the better they do. So let's just let them fly under the radar.
I'm with you.
So the prank call thing, how do we feel about that, by the way? Was that
I did. First and foremost, I thought it was uncalled for. I don't think it's the right thing to do for guys in college to be prank calling people, especially private numbers and stuff along those lines. But the other thing I think that was unique about this weekend is people acted like this was the first time that's ever happened. I think it happens every year to double-digit draft prospects.
Yeah, so not to get, I guess we're going to get into it a little bit here, but so if you didn't know, Shedeur Sanders was prank called on Saturday. It was the day 2 of the draft, and I believe the
Saints were on the clock.
I believe it was a couple of Ole Miss students.
No,
it was not
Ole Miss students.
Okay.
It was Jeff Ulbricht's son, who plays D3 football, Jax Ulbricht, and his friend just had an Ole Miss shirt on.
Okay, I see what it is. So it was the son of Jeff Ulbricht. He apologized, I guess, and the Falcons apologized as well. The NFL is now looking into the situation, specifically how Sanders' private number was leaked. Sources told ESPN's Adam Schefter. The Falcons said in a statement Sunday that 21-year-old Jax Ulbricht wrote down the number from his father's open iPad while visiting his parents' home to later conduct a prank call. So that's how he got the number. But again, like Jacob said, not the only prank call. It's just the only one that went viral because obviously it's Shedeur Sanders.
Well, maybe the other draft picks don't have cameras following him around 24.
That's right. New Indianapolis Colts tight end Tyler Warren also received a prank call before he was selected in the first round. A league source told ESPN's Stephen Holder, Buffalo Bills 6th-round pick Chase Lunt, an offensive tackle, said in his introductory news conference that he received 4 or 5 prank calls during the draft. So certainly not the only one to
Cooper
receive
Jean
prank
last
calls.
year famously received 2.
Yep. So, and to answer your question, I understand that it could be perceived as disrespectful. I think it's a prank call. I mean, are we going to send him to prison? What are we going to? I mean, what's the reaction for the kid? Like, it's.
I think more of it is the NFL needs to have a better system for how the private numbers of NFL draft picks can get leaked to coaches' kids.
Yeah, they just.
I think that's the problem.
Yeah, they got to have the numbers just in the phone.
Anyone
already.
asking for Jeff Ulbricht to be fired or Jax Ulbricht to face any kind of legal pushback, that's all nonsense. None of that should happen. I certainly disagree with any of that. I think this is more of an NFL problem than anyone else. How do you have kids walking around their own house and just stumbling into Shedeur Sanders' phone number?
Yeah, I mean, that's the part where it's probably frustrating. The kid should apologize to his father and maybe Shedeur. But outside of that, he doesn't owe the world an apology. It was a harmless prank. If you want to say it was harmful because the image of it and everything like that to Shedeur, I'd argue the bigger image drop for Shedeur was falling to 144th overall. That's just
still
my
end up
opinion.
in Cleveland on top of it. Those bums in Cleveland, those losers.
I don't want to speak for everybody in this room, but certainly I would imagine most of us have prank called once or twice in our life. And the fact,
Sometimes two at once. You put them on the phone together.
yeah,
great.
that's very, very funny. So listen. I'm not going to sit here and make that a story. He prank called him. He fell for it. And honestly, I thought Shedeur handled the prank pretty well.
Very well.
Is there a reason he says legendary every 5 seconds?
I think it's like a Russ Denver thing where
Okay.
let's ride, like that's his sign off. But instead of being like a rallying cry to the fans and the
Yeah.
team he's on, it's just himself.
Because he just says legendary.
You think he's
going to
say 144 now?
You think he went? Yeah, I think so. Do you think they'll retire his number?
Well, for a while
Nobody
there,
will ever be able to be picked.
144. That would be pretty cool. It was thrown out there by Mike Florio that potentially with all of the antitrust lawsuits and things along those lines, if Shedeur had pulled his name out of the draft after day 2, there was a belief that they could have won a lawsuit to get him eligibility for next year. You had a year left. You lose it when you go to the combine. So potentially a route that was thrown out for him kind of as a fan fiction. And my question there was, I mean, does he wear a new number, get a second number retired for this last year at Colorado had he gone back? Or would they have to unretire the 2 so he could wear it again? Or would he just simply play with his name on the rafters?
I'd imagine you get a new number and then you retire that one after.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only option,
And
right?
you'd be the first player ever to have 2 jerseys retired
Of course.
in 3 years.
Well, we all know you can't play quarterback for a college and not have your jersey retired.
Correct,
I mean, Cam
obviously.
Ward went 1. He played for 3 colleges. They all retired his number, right?
Maybe not.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I thought you would have more of a problem with the prank calls. I'm glad you don't.
Really? You thought I would have an issue with
I
that?
don't know why. I
thought it
was just trying to guess people's takes on this. For one, like we've all been in college and young and dumb, and I guarantee you, if any of us came across a number to one of these, I mean, I'm pretty sure, whether it's right or wrong, we would have found it pretty entertaining back in our college days to maybe have a little prank call like this, right or wrong. But no one got hurt. These guys all got drafted. Like, let's not. I mean, I see some of the do-gooders on social media that want the coach fired and all this. Probably needs to be reprimanded. I do think the team needs to be like, hey, like, I mean,
Let's not.
I don't know why this number's floating around. Like, you know the severity and the importance of this. But let's not act like the guy who made the prank call. I had more of a problem with him posting the evidence of him doing the prank
that's
call.
How are you in the video?
Yeah, that's the big issue.
He
That's
told
the
on
big issue.
himself.
That's the big issue.
He told on himself.
If you're gonna prank call, like you don't listen. You just do it for you and your buddies. You don't got to share it to the entire world.
Also, you had to have a level of confidence that Shedeur's side was going to be filming it.
Correct.
Like, it was going to get out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there was no need for his angle, and I mean, certainly that's why he got caught. That was one of the, probably a first ballot, I'm sorry I got caught apology.
Yeah.
I had more of a problem with the apology. Yeah, right. I had more of a problem with the apology.
He
than
misspelled
the
Shedeur's name and then
That's
tagged
tough.
his Instagram account in the end with it
That's
spelled
tough.
correctly.
That's tough.
It
And, you
happens.
know, I think if I'm the Falcons right now, that's your defensive coordinator. Is your playbook just sitting around downtown Atlanta? You went and grabbed a coffee from Starbucks, just left it, on the desk. Anyone can find it. I'm worried about my information as an organization getting out now. That's one of your 3 most important coaches just leaving stuff open or around his house. That's not a great place to be.
And to be clear, this happens every year. My problem, just like this entire weekend, it was Shedeur is the biggest victim in the history of sports. Poor Shedeur. I can't believe that they would do that to him. If you should be just as outraged that they do this and prank athletes every year, right or wrong. They do it every single season. But because it was Shedeur, who has very thick skin, by the way. He can handle it all. He can handle all criticism, but he can't handle a prank call. This is where the media draws the line. But, all right, we got plenty to dive into. The Cincinnati Bengals, we were very intrigued to see how they were going to follow up their first-round draft selection from Thursday night. Well, the draft has come and gone, so we have a ton to dive into when it comes to the Bengals. We got headlines coming up around the corner. We'll go pick by pick. How much better did the Cincinnati Bengals improve their roster over the weekend? And then some of the top headlines coming out of NFL draft weekend as well. The schedule release coming out. That's like the next big thing. If you want to circle on the NFL calendar, that's coming up around the corner as well. And then your Cincinnati Reds get the sweep over the Rockies, and now they turn their attention towards one of their hated rivals out of the division, the St. Louis Cardinals, and they have them coming up at Great American Ballpark. So we have a loaded show for you here on a Monday. We'll be right back. So I don't know if you're OCD like me, but when you notice something that you have to have someone point it out to you, and now you can't unsee it. Outside of the fact that I have this beautiful Cincinnati Bengals helmet sitting with me because I'm a new Bengals fan. Apparently, we have a room full of Bengals fans for the first time, really since this show started. So,
right.
so there you go. But apparently,
Reed's filled in a lot.
What's that?
Reed's filled in a lot.
Oh my gosh,
we've
yes.
had a room full of Bengals fan, plenty.
The disrespect to Reed on my end. No wonder he thinks I don't like him. It is what it is. But the Chatterbox sign fell down behind us.
It did.
Now all I see is that there is this little gap over here. There it is.
Just a cruel thing to do to our lovely YouTube listeners.
Yep. And now there's nothing over there, right there. Now that's all I can see. I didn't even notice it.
You can't even see it.
You can't really even see it on the.
You're not even looking that direction.
Yeah,
But when I look up and see me on the monitor,
okay,
that's all I see.
Yeah, it did fall down. I don't know how it fell down, but it certainly fell down. By the way, during the break, Craig called me using the classic star 6-7 trick. That still works. It's good to see that still works.
Jack Solberg, take notes because his phone number was on the phone.
Was it really?
Oh yeah.
You just got to be smarter. That's the real issue I have. If you're gonna prank, you just got to be way better at it.
I mean, yeah.
Way
like I
better.
said, posting the video. That's why you can't post the video out yourself and then apologize for it. Just like, thought it was a harmless prank. Apologize to anyone that upset and move on. But like the heartfelt 3-paragraph, apology is what it is. But we got plenty of draft takes to dive into. We'll recap the Bengals draft coming up here in a moment. But we kick off, well, not really kick off, but we kick off the second segment of the show with sending it to our guy, Elliot, for Elliot's Headlines.
Score updates, breaking news, local and national headlines, whatever's going on in the world of sports, Elliot has you covered. Off the Bench brings you Elliot's Headlines.
Let's switch it up. Let's go to NHL first. NHL first. The
Talking
Oilers.
puck.
Talking puck. The Oilers.
Pocket. Let's just start with hockey.
Nice.
Too far.
Nice. That's real nice. The Oilers, they survive in overtime against the Kings to even up that series at 2 apiece. 4-3 the final yesterday. The Capitals, they take a 3-1 series lead. They win 5-2 against the Canadiens yesterday afternoon. The Hurricanes, they win 5-2 over the Devils. They lead that series 3-1. And the Blues, they win 5-1, split the series up at 2 apop. So
Came back, down 2-0.
That's right. So those are some of your NHL headlines from yesterday. NBA news from this weekend. The Warriors, they won on Saturday despite having no Jimmy Butler. 104-93 the final score there. The Nuggets, they win at the buzzer against the Clippers on Saturday night. 101-99 the final score. Aaron Gordon put back a missed Jokic three-pointer. Jokic had 36 points, 21 rebounds, 2-2. That series
What'd
is
you think
tied
about
up.
that one?
The buzzer beater?
You can't. Buzzer beater dunk's tough for me. He
don't like it?
He had his fingers on it, it looked like to me when you slowed it down, especially, the dunk is...
No, I don't think so.
It was pretty close, man. It was
I-
pretty close.
if-
I think if they would have called it not a good basket on the floor, I don't think they would have overturned it.
Here's my thing. If there's anything that's close to a buzzer beater, regardless of 0.1, 0.2 seconds,
should let it
you
stand.
just count it.
I don't disagree with that take.
You just absolutely count it.
This one specifically, and that's why you always tell the guys to lay it in, especially at the buzzer. Get it out of your hands. So a risky play by Gordon, but lucky it counted. First time ever there was a buzzer beater dunk.
Really?
Official buzzer beater dunk.
Wow.
Yeah, the Valley Oop from a few years ago was not ruled a dunk because I don't believe he made contact with the rim.
That's wild. It's the first time it's happened in the playoffs? then?
Correct.
I see. The Thunder, they complete the sweep against the Grizzlies, 117-115. The final score 2 nights ago, SGA 38 points. Congratulations to the Thunder. The Cavaliers, the 1 seed in the East, they went up 3-0 after dominating 124-97 over the Miami Heat on Saturday. Late last night, the Pacers took a 3-1 series lead after a 129-103 victory over Milwaukee. Damian Lillard had to leave the game early with a possible Achilles injury. Damian Lillard notably hurt heading into this series, and now he's probably going to leave the series hurt as well.
When Giannis inevitably forces his way out of Milwaukee
Sure.
this summer, they're going to be in a disgustingly bad spot.
Yeah, the Bucks, they got their championship though, so I guess it
This
worked
is the
out.
second time a Wisconsin star has torn the entire franchise down after underperforming for one championship during his prime.
Nice.
Thank you.
Took a second, but I got it.
Maybe third. I don't know how Kareem left.
The Lakers are in trouble. They blew a big lead in the fourth quarter. Anthony Edwards dropped 43 in their 116-113 win over the Lakers. The Lakers, it appears, maybe Nico was right. Maybe Luka couldn't get it done.
It is a problem when you reach the NBA playoffs and you only have 5 players. Lakers played 5 players for the entirety of the second half yesterday. Rui Hachimura, LeBron James, Luka Doncic, Austin Reeves, Dorian Finney-Smith played the entirety of the second half. Their starting center, Jackson Hayes, played 4 total minutes in the game, scored a basket right off the rip. They just have no depth. It's tough to not wonder where this team could be. The Lakers, if the Mark Williams trade would have went through, if they would have had a true center, flipping Dalton Knecht, who hasn't played in most of these playoff games, for a true center, giving them some depth, maybe the Lakers team was in a different spot. But when you have a 40-year-old as one of your 2 star players, he's playing 46 minutes, having a 27-point near triple-double, and that's not enough. And a lot of people are labeling it as a bad game for him because you expect so much more going into it. Luka had 38. And it's just not enough because you don't have any depth. So it's brutal to watch. It's tough. They're probably dead. I would be shocked if Anthony Edwards lets that Timberwolves team blow a 3-1 lead. I know a lot of the focus is on the Lakers, and I certainly just spent a lot of time talking about the Lakers, but he's a killer, man.
He's really good.
He is an absolute killer. I know a lot of people are questioning who the face of the league is going to be next. I think it's probably Anthony Edwards. He already won a gold medal. He's dominated Kevin Durant last year, has those videos and clips of that interaction, and now doing the same thing to LeBron this year. Potentially Steph Curry next round. He's going to pick off the legends that are remaining one by one and take the Timberwolves back to the finals probably, or at least go on a good run here before they run into the Thunder or someone else that's a pretty big buzzsaw in the West. So I love Anthony Edwards. It's a shame what's happening to the Lakers, though.
So when the Lakers lose this series, is this going to be, I can't believe, look at LeBron. Michael would never. Are we going to blame Luka, though? Isn't the media got done telling you how LeBron's not the face of this franchise anymore? It's Luka.
Yeah.
So are we going to blame, and I'm not really advocating to do that at all, but we know how the media works. Are we just going to keep blaming LeBron no matter how old he gets, and we're not going to hold Luka accountable for getting knocked out in the first round either? It's funny how that works.
Look, when Mike was 40, he was smoking cigars in the casino and playing blackjack. So it's hard for me to hold LeBron, making the playoffs and playing at a high level against him when, the other GOAT was long gone at this point.
Yeah, I mean, they will continue to.
Correct.
We is a loose term. They will continue to say LeBron can't do it. He can't finish. But not me. The Knicks, they hung on to win 94-93 over the Pistons. The refs, after the game, admitted they missed a crucial no-foul call in the last few seconds.
That's the dumbest thing we do.
Which obviously would have sent the Pistons to the free throw line to presumably give them the win. Pistons now trail that series 3-1.
That's the dumbest thing we do.
What, the referees?
What does that do
the referees admitting?
The Pistons?
Nothing.
Thanks?
Yeah, it does nothing. And I don't fully...
They should honestly, in a situation like that, get him back out there.
Yeah.
Let him shoot the free throws. See what happens.
It's my belief if you're going to go after the game and admit the mistake, then the game I don't believe should when Jim Joyce made the Jim Joyce made the call over Galarrago. I really do believe, and he came up and he's like, I kicked the S out of that call. I messed up. I missed it. I ruined that kid's perfect game. If that's the case, rule it a perfect game.
Right.
If you miss the call and you know you missed the call the thing.
Right.
And we'll go to the free throw line and we'll settle it. But that's not how sports work. It's for the sports talk. That's just a sports talk thing.
Right, but I did see a lot of people saying, that's on the Pistons. It's J.B. Bickerstaff's fault because he used his challenge earlier in the game. Could have challenged it there. Is there no parameters set up in the NBA to allow them to just review the last shot of the game? I mean, I know in the NFL, especially college football, you can't challenge plays at the end of the game. It's called down by the booth. I figured that'd be something pretty similar in the NBA, but I saw a lot of people saying you can't review that without the coach's challenge. That just seems crazy to me.
Yeah, I think it's outrageous. I mean, I guess the point is so we don't spend all day looking at every single call, but you're going to do it anyway. I mean, if you're
deciding playoff games.
Correct, yeah. I mean, it was nonsense. Bad call, and the Pistons are probably not going to lose the series because of it. So, brutally bad break for Detroit. Heading over to NASCAR, it was Talladega yesterday. Austin Cindric, he wins. The number 2 team Penske Ford, is that right?
Yeah.
No idea if that's right. But congratulations. Blackmore wanted me to say it. Kyle Larson came in second. William Byron, Blackmore's guy, came in third place there at Talladega. So I just wanted to mention that so I don't get yelled at in the chat. Rolling on to Major League Baseball. Finally, we'll talk about Major League Baseball. The Reds, they sweep the Rockies. They sweep the Rockies 8-1, a win yesterday. The Rockies fall to 4-23 on this young season. They are 4-23. Tough place to play, though.
It is.
It is a tough place to play.
You can't argue against that.
6 different Reds had multi-hit games yesterday. 6. Noelvi Marte notably had 3. He went 7 for 15 in this series against Colorado. He had 7 runs batted in and 2 stolen bases, including, obviously, a home run.
Reds moved to 12-1 in their last 13 games against the Rockies. Notably that they played there last year as well as this year, so tough place to play.
Tough place to play. I've always said it's a tough place to play, and I'm going to continue to say it's a tough place to play because where do most of their wins come from?
Well, most of their 40 wins.
Most of their 40 wins come from home. Toughest place to play.
That's true. Another Reds headline.
Sure.
Oh, no, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, I thought you were done with the Rockies game, so I was going to jump in with the next thing. Jose Barrera called up for the St. Louis Cardinals.
I saw this.
Before their series against the Reds. Certainly seems like a very Reds move to be killed by Jose Barrera through these 4-game series. So I would certainly expect at least one walk-off home run or Gold Glove play in the field to cause as much pain as possible. But yeah, former Reds top prospect, if I'm not mistaken, now going to be playing in the middle infield or I guess potentially DH, the outfield. He kind of moved around since his failure in Cincinnati, but we'll see what happens in St. Louis.
I saw Bryce Spalding tweeted, and he's 100% right. He is going to have 4 home runs in this series.
Yeah, no question.
So it's just the curse. It's just the curse of the Reds. Whatever bad happens, and then they come back, and then they're all good again. And it's just crazy. That's just what it is. But good for him. I'm happy for him. It didn't work out here. Certainly, people I think died on the Jose Barrero hill.
Died on it, yeah.
I certainly did not. I gave up on Jose Barrero a long time ago, but good for him.
You might have given up on Jose Barrero before he got here.
I think I did. I most likely did. Nick Lodolo yesterday, 7 innings, allowing 2 hits, technically, and striking out 9. Those 2 hits, obviously, one was a throwing error from Elliot De La Cruz. That is not considered a throwing error. It was ruled a hit for some strange reason. And then
it's ridiculous. Imagine if he was an outfielder, he would have a no-hitter.
You're right.
It's ridiculous.
And then another one, it was a weak ground ball down the left field or down the third base line. So those are the 2 hits Nick Lodolo gives up. It was a masterful performance. Good for him. And by the way, it's a tough place to play. It's a tough place to pitch in Colorado. The Reds moved to 15-13. They are 1.5 games out of the division lead. 1.5 games out of the division lead. Other MLB scores, the Cubs, they dropped the series finale and the series to the Phillies last night, 3-1, the final score there. The Yankees, they take the series from Toronto after a 5-1 win and an 11-2 win over the Blue Jays yesterday, doubleheader. The Mariners, they take a 7-6 victory. The Dodgers, they crushed the Pirates 9-2, win that series. But Glasnow did have to leave early in that game. We'll see how severe it is.
That's just scheduled, right?
I think.
It's just, he's pitched 5 or so games.
Probably.
He's going to get hurt now.
Probably. Most likely that's the case. The Rays, they hang on to beat the Padres 4-2. The Diamondbacks, they win the finale but lose the series to Atlanta. Final score 6-4 yesterday. But it was, I believe, Saturday night when all hell broke loose in Arizona with a 4-home-run game by Eugenio Suarez.
Yeah.
Absolutely unbelievable. I think over half of his hits are home runs.
Wow.
I'm almost he's hitting 160, but I'm pretty sure over half of his hits are home runs, if I read that right.
At least, since the Reds let him go, we spent a lot of money on third base. At least that's worked out.
No. Not quite. The White Sox, they lose in 10 innings to the Athletics, 3-2. The Giants, they walked off the Rangers. I wish I could show this clip, but unfortunately we can't due to copyright reasons. The Giants it was a Elliot Ramos routine ground ball thrown into the stands and right, and then as he rounds the bases, they throw it in, and it's thrown into the stands and left, and he scoots all around the base path, and he wins the game on a Little League walk-off home run. Very, very funny. It's always cool to see those. And finally, the Brewers, they crushed the Cardinals 7-1, but the Cardinals do win that series, so the Cardinals with a little bit of momentum heading into this series with Cincinnati. And finally, NFL news, the Commanders are going home. The organization agreed to a deal with the District of Columbia to build a stadium at the site where the team had its greatest success. It was RFK Stadium, the team's home from 1961 to 1996. It still stands. An announcement is expected to be made Monday, today, by D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser and Commanders owner Josh Harris.
Love it. Never made sense to me why the Washington Commanders played in Virginia. I love that they're getting back to D.C. Play as close to your fans as you possibly can. I think it's always a good thing.
That's right.
Yeah, I know they're also pushing to go back to the old name. We'll see if
Yeah,
they win,
and there was
that
a
one.
big petition.
But
other NFL news, Hunter Renfrow has made his way back to the league, said he was working out trying to get back to the league a few weeks ago, and he signed with the Panthers over the weekend, so adding to that receiving room in Carolina.
All right, off the bench, presented by UDF, NFL Draft Weekend. The Cincinnati Bengals had 6 picks. There was some rumblings. I remember Duke Tobin saying, they'd like to get more. Well, to get more, you would have to obviously trade an asset, which would most likely be Trey Hendrickson, Pratt, or trade back. They didn't do any of those things, and we'll talk about the 6 new additions, plus some of the undrafted free agents that we'll talk about coming up around the corner as well. The Bengals, how much better do they improve their roster? We'll discuss when we come back. All right, and we are back off the bench, presented by UDF. Justin Kinner, Casey McAllister, Elliot Rearing, and Jacob Tissett with you here on a Monday. Hope everybody had a great weekend. We opened up the show talking, of course, about right away, of course, the clip of me saying if the Browns drafted Shedeur Sanders, that I would become a Bengals fan, so I got to lean into the Bengals fan thing. I'm giving it a shot. All right, I'm gonna hoo-day it up with the guys here, and just give it a shot. We'll just see how it goes. We'll see how far I can take this, but we'll find out. The prank calls from over the weekend, I do see some things on Twitter now. A lot of people are calling for the defensive coordinator to be fired. Thought that was a little much. I'm like, if we're gonna for the Suns' mistake, I'm like, well, then Andy Reid needs to be fired, right? Like, is that how this works? We fire head coaches for what their kids do, but nonetheless. Over the weekend, the Cincinnati Bengals, we spent a lot of time on Friday reacting to the Bengals' first-round pick with the number 17 overall pick in the first round with Shemar Stewart, the edge rusher out of Texas A&M. And I said I wasn't the biggest fan of the pick, but at the end of the day, I wanted to kind of wait and see who they drafted behind him. I think you have to kind of look at Shemar Stewart as one of the full package to see just how much better this team improved their roster over the weekend with the remainder of the draft. And Casey, we'll throw it to you to start. The Cincinnati Bengals, as we sit here right now, they obviously get Shemar Stewart. They get Demetrius Knight, the linebacker out of South Carolina. They obviously had Barrett Carter, another linebacker out of Clemson later on in the draft. How do you, with just who they drafted, we'll get to the undrafted free agents more in a moment, but how much better did they improve their roster over the weekend? Did they do the job that you were hoping that they would do when it's all said and done?
That I hope they would have done, not exactly. I mean, I'm not super negative on this draft class as a lot of people are. I think I can see the vision of what they're trying to accomplish. I do think that a lot of the picks on day 2, so that's the second and third round, were reaches. I like both guys, though. I like Demetrius, and I think he was a third-round pick in my mind, in my evaluation of the guy. Dylan Fairchild, same thing, a fourth-round pick. But when you do a little more digging on each guy, like I think you can find some solid roles and starting potential for both guys, and that's all you really want for this draft. You want guys that can provide you a lot of snaps and a lot of value, and I think all of their first 3 picks are going to do that. I think Fairchild comes in day 1 and starts. Just because he didn't test athletically, do the athletic testing, doesn't mean he's not an athlete. A lot of the interviews and a lot of the players on Georgia said he was one of the strongest guys on the whole team. That's good enough for me. I think that you look at the film and it shows an athlete. So if he tested athletically, he's a second-round pick, just like Tate Ratledge, because he's younger. So the same thing with Demetrius Knight. If he wasn't 25, we wouldn't be having that discussion either. He'd be a fringe first-round talent. So, yeah, and then you look at day 3, too. Barrett Carter, I love that pick, too. I had him as my fourth-round type of prospect that I was looking for the Bengals to select, addressing linebacker. And Jalen Rivers liked him a lot too. Taj Brooks, he's one of my guys as well. I like the day 3 much more than I do any of the other the picks in day 2 or day 1. But overall, I think what it showed us was their evaluation of the team and what the team's needs were. And I think that it exposed, in a lot of ways, their thought process is very skewed. You invest high draft capital in a 25-year-old player, yet you won't sign Trey Hendrickson, who's older, just for those reasons. It doesn't make sense. Where's the philosophy balance there? Where's the cohesion there? It doesn't make sense. Why are you drafting a guy that's the oldest in the class with your second-round pick when you won't even sign your best player on the team just because he's old? Doesn't make sense. It also shows that they really value linebacker a lot. When they said that they're going to go to a 4-3 defense, they meant it. They really meant it. You got to have a lot of linebackers for that. But the problem I have with it is they think that the problem is the talent at linebacker. Obviously, they double dip there. You're trying to get younger and stronger, faster, whatever. That's not even the first line of defense for our defense, who struggled incredibly last year. The defensive tackles were awful. Rookies, young, and then Sheldon Rankins was a complete and utter failure. But I think that the evaluation of the team itself was very skewed. I know Jacob has a pretty good take on the idea of the of just the talent acquisition, how much you actually go and supplant after last season, investing so much in defensive tackle. But to me, I just feel like their evaluation of themselves is just not good enough. It's not correct. It's not where it should be. And overall, I give the draft, the process of it, a C. I like all the guys. They selected, to be honest with you. I can convince myself that Shemar can turn out to be a phenomenal player on this team. But it's a lot of unnecessary risks that they had to take because either A, they don't like character concerns, or B, they didn't do enough in free agency to address linebacker or guard, and here we are, and it's one of the worst rated draft classes amongst national pundits, and I kind of agree. I think it was a bang average draft. I like a lot of the guys. I think there's a lot of starters there, but I think you could have gotten better starters, and I think that they could have done a better job. So that's where it's kind of a tough balancing act there for the Bengals and the fandom here. Jacob, I know that I don't want to steal your take.
I got you.
I think it's great.
I was a little bit higher, I think, just a little bit higher on this draft class than a lot of other people, and I think it's because over the last 48 hours, I spent a lot of time on Shemar Stewart trying to talk myself into that pick, and this draft class changes so drastically if he gets even close to his ceiling that I think right now, sitting a day after the draft, when we don't know if these players are good or not, why as Bengals fans would we willingly mark him significantly below that? Right. As a career player,
That's
right?
fair, yeah.
So as this is purely projection and no one knows, that's the most fun part about draft grades is no one has any idea how these guys are going to work out. So you're just making guesses, and funny enough, when you say, analysts have us ranked towards the end of the NFL teams, when analysts rank draft classes, they very rarely rank team fit or how much of an instant impact guys are going to make. More often than not, an A is player or teams that drafted closest to their individual draft board, and an F are the teams that deviated from Mel Kiper's draft board or whoever it is, Todd McShay's draft board, because they think they know best. So if we don't believe, in the Bengals coaches to draft their guys, which is clearly what they did. Dan Pitcher said they went to Georgia's Pro Day to work out Dylan Fairchild, not Tate Ratledge as the number one prospect there. They said Al Golden was waiting on pins and needles for Demetrius Knight to fall to pick 49. If our coaching staff gets our guys and, we as a fan base think it's a D or an F draft, we need new coaches because we don't trust them to run their system. And I think something that's really important to recognize when we look at, when we had the most confidence here in Cincinnati in our defense, it was 2021 when this team went to the Super Bowl. And usually what we circle for that team is, we had an all-pro safety covering up a lot of the holes in that unit. And that's absolutely correct. Jesse Bates was phenomenal during that run. But it's also when we thought the linebackers were the second and third best players on that team. Right after that season, we extended Jermaine Pratt and Logan Wilson to big-time deals. If we can get elite linebacker play, which is what we had under Al Golden last time he was on this Bengals coaching staff, I think it can raise the floor of this defense a lot. And Casey mentioned there that everyone thought D-line was a major need and really scratching our head leaving the draft without an interior rusher. I talked about Walter Nolan in the first round. That tells you how much of a need I thought defensive line was. But I think something we might have all overlooked with this Bengals team is how many resources they spent on defensive line last year. They drafted Chris Jenkins early. They drafted McKinley Jackson on day 3. That's a lot of resources on that defensive line. They go spend the contract on B.J. Hill. They go add T.J. Slayton. I don't know if this is a team that's willing to dump a ton of resources into that defensive line. If you take a lineman in the 3rd round, in the 4th round, you're basically punting on one of those two, Chris Jenkins or McKinley Jackson. And I don't think that's something the Cincinnati Bengals or the Brown family are comfortable doing. I don't know if it's Tobin, I don't know if it's the Blackburns, but you're basically saying, hey, we're giving this guy 1 year, it didn't work out, we're going a different direction here. And I don't think that's something they were willing to do. So losing Jermaine Pratt, losing Akeem Davis-Gaither, I think that's what they made the step here. I think Oren Burks, the free agency addition, is probably going to be the Akeem Davis-Gaither. He was a big special teams player in Philadelphia before the injuries forced him into the starting role for the playoffs, so certainly think he'll fill into that role for us this year. Barrett Carter was a special teams captain his freshman year or freshman and sophomore year at Clemson before being a 3-year starter at linebacker. I certainly expect him to play in the middle of that defense, but can contribute special teams-wise as well, which is probably not something you get from defensive linemen. So they drafted very versatile players. They focused on day 1 starters after taking a swing on Shemar Stewart. And Kinner, you asked the question before the draft, how many starters do you think the Bengals are going to draft? And I said in 6 picks, they have to leave the draft with 4. I think the betting line at this point is 4.5 starters. I think Demetrius Knight is certainly going to start. I think Barrett Carter is going to be your 3rd linebacker. And in a 4-3 defense, we'll probably see a lot more of him than we did of Akeem Davis-Gaither in that role in Lou Anarumo's defense. And then Fairchild and Rivers are both going to have an opportunity to compete to start at guard. And I fully expect Taj Brooks to be our 2nd running back behind Chase Brown. So these are all guys that are going to get significant run for this Bengals team that needed to infuse this roster with guys that are ready to play now. The knock on Demetrius Knight, which is why he was a bad 2nd-round pick, is he's 25 years old. He's probably playing his best football right now. Seems like a good thing for a team trying to win a Super Bowl this year. So, I'm trying to be more optimistic about this class than I have been in the past. I think there's a lot of good swings while also taking a lot of high floor guys that balance it out. And if Shemar Stewart can be great, then, this might inch up towards an A class.
I do think a lot of it comes into play when you're talking about Trey Hendrickson. If Trey Hendrickson doesn't play this season, I don't think that this class is capable of replacing. We talk about Moneyball replacing the aggregate.
Yeah.
I don't think you're replacing 15 sacks with the guys that we have. If Trey Hendrickson plays, maybe they're still working on an extension of some sort. If that's the case, then I think these guys as pieces next to Trey Hendrickson, they look fantastic. I think they look fantastic. So if I were to give it a grade myself, it would be like a C-, But if Trey Hendrickson's here for the next 2 years, it goes up to like a B+.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So it does, a lot of it depends on what Trey Hendrickson's going to do for this season and potentially the next few seasons.
Yeah,
if he were to resign.
The other thing too, Elliot, that you mentioned, all about if Trey stays or not. If it is true, you get 4.5 starters out of that group. Pratt and Volson are expendable then, which gives you an extra $9 million. So who cares if you extend Trey Hendrickson? You're going to get an extra $10 million to give him this year so that you have 23 already. Like, I think that it could be very, very beneficial in the long run if it all works out the way that we hope. And this is being very optimistic, and I think everyone understands that this is a very optimistic side of thinking it. But if it does work out, you get to keep Trey for another year or two, and it didn't really matter because you had the money anyways. And you get starters on your offensive line, and you get younger at the linebacker spot, more athletic at the linebacker spot. I mean, I think it makes sense. I think it does make sense, and I know I talked about it last week before I left. They have $80 million to play with next season. Like, I feel like there's going to be opportunities to add on to this team, and overall, like, it'll be a home run if Shemar works out.
Absolutely.
I think we look at it so much more different if he pans out to be what we hope he can be, a Myles Garrett level of athlete, a player. I mean, that's a Hall of Fame level guy. That's what we're banking on. Not to mention, too, Miles Murphy and the other guys that we're hoping to have some serious development with Al Golden's defense. Maybe they just looked at it and said, we can't have enough pass rushers, and we get some of these guys that can play inside, outside, and given situations, and just roll with it. And we'll get super athletic at linebacker so they can run around and make plays and
rush.
And
Both
rush.
of these guys have moderate rush upside.
Yeah. And I remember over the weekend I asked Joe Goodberry, a very prominent name in the Bengals sphere, what the defense will look like in a 4-3. Is it like a 4-3 under where, you got a guy that is considered a linebacker but, plays standing up 2 feet, going to go rush the quarterback on a 50% of the time, and the other time he's dropping back. And I think that's what Demetrius Knight is, I believe, is someone that can basically play on the line and rush. And Barrett Carter's your more traditional linebacker, the guys that you think of like Logan Wilson. So if that's the way that they're going to go, and you got Shemar Stewart, you got Demetrius Knight, I mean, you added technically 2 pass rushers then in that sense. So I think that is the very optimistic outlook of this draft class, and I understand that. But if you can see the vision, then you can make it make sense. If they started like going after players that you couldn't make it make sense, and we were questioning what they were doing, like the Browns drafting 2 quarterbacks, that's when it gets like, what are we doing?
And there's your Casey Stray of the show. There's your one Casey Stray of the show.
Doesn't bother me.
He's not a
Who dey,
he's a
baby?
Bengals fan.
All right, we'll step away for a few. Want to pick up with this when we come back. I put a poll up, and by the way, we have almost about 190 people tuning in right now. Give the stream a like, please. For those watching on Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, please give it a thumbs up. Give that like. Are we going to extend the offer to, if we can ever get to the 120 likes?
Not every day.
I don't think we can do it every day. I'll tell you.
Big
I don't
Fridays.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Big
We'll do something crazy with it. If you get to 150, I'll take a pie. If you get to if the chat gets to 150 likes today, I will take a pie to the face.
200 likes, I break your non-dominant arm.
Done.
Ooh.
Has to be before the show ends.
Okay, cool. Let's do it.
All right. But put a poll in their case. Just, I'm curious, like, our thoughts on the draft, but how confident are Bengals fans? How do they feel about this Bengals draft? Do the Bengals have a good draft? Do you feel confident about it? Word it how you want, Case, because
You can just give them. You can just do it a grade. What grade do you give them? A, B, C, D.
Yeah.
there you go. And we'll discuss that when we come back. Your favorite draft pick that the Bengals made over the weekend, your least favorite draft pick that they made over the weekend. We'll pick up with that when we come back. More Off the Bench when we return. All right, and we are back off the bench for those listening in Dayton. This is hour number 2 on radio. Off the bench presented by UDF. Reacting to all things NFL draft over the weekend. Diving into the Cincinnati Bengals. How much did they improve their roster over the weekend? What was the poll that we put in there, Case? What did you put in there?
The poll was, how confident are you in the Bengals draft class? And I put A, B, C, or D and F.
There you go.
Because you can only put 4 options. But.
So we'll keep track of those who are in the chat, how they kind of feel about this. Elliot, I know you're not, you don't really follow all the college prospects in depth. So some of these names, especially as we get further in the draft, some of these names are obviously foreign. But as a Bengals fan, you watch the draft. You're coming out of the draft. What's the vibe for you? The Bengals did what over the weekend in your eyes?
I think they did enough. I think that's the way I look at it. I don't think they failed the draft. I know everybody was upset with Shemar Stewart. Outside of that pick, I thought they've conducted a group of guys that are going to be able to play in the NFL at a high caliber. I think Demetrius Knight, I know the comparison was Jermaine Pratt.
Yeah.
If you can get Jermaine Pratt, if you can replace Jermaine Pratt with a better, younger Jermaine Pratt.
3 years old Jermaine Pratt.
then I feel good about it, right? Dylan Fairchild, I heard rave reviews about nonstop. Is it the guy that we all thought we'd get coming in? Probably not. But getting him there in the 3rd round, I thought was a very, very good pick. Barrett Carter is going to be a dog here. He's going to be great. I don't know too much about Jalen Rivers. I didn't read too much about him or Taj Brooks. So those 2 guys I don't really have a ton of in-depth knowledge about. But certainly Taj Brooks on a Bengals roster that desperately needs another running back. I believe they found one. So you know what I mean. I don't think this is an A+ draft. I don't think it's a B+ draft as of right now. If Trey Hendrickson plays here for the next year to 2 years without any of the drama that goes with it, I do think that this class defensively improves. I think it improves greatly. When you take away Trey and add these guys, I don't know if it's going to be a massive improvement, but I do think it's going to be a different defense. It's going to be different. You have a new defensive coordinator. You got a new bunch of guys coming in here. And I think they're going to be tough. I think they're going to be significantly better than they were last year. So again, I don't think it's the world's best draft. I think it was I saw it in the chat. It was like a typical Bengals draft. It felt like. I just don't think they had a bad pick. I'm looking at the 6 picks. Unless you want to count Shemar Stewart as a bad pick, which I don't. I'm not going to give anybody a bad pick grade here, at least out of these 6 guys. Casey, you weren't here when the Bengals drafted Shemar Stewart. But your thoughts of the RAS score, because that's really
your cup of tea.
That is my.
That's
bread
why.
and
That's
butter
why.
here.
I mean, that's why they drafted him. It's because he had a
Correct.
perfect RAS score. It's because he's athletic as hell. Do you think that's going to translate into sacks? It didn't translate into sacks in the college level, but will that translate? Could it translate into sacks in the National Football League?
Yeah, I mean, I also think, too, you got to think about his scheme, what he was playing, what he was asked to do. I mean, he was asked to play basically over top of the tackles that he was going up against, sometimes even inside shoulder. And that's just not how edge rushers play in the NFL. They play that wide 9 look where they've got basically a straight path to the quarterback. He was having to do a lot of arching and bending, and he's athletic enough to make enough of a disruption but not finish the play. I think you adjust that to the NFL where you're playing a little bit wider and you're asked to do a little bit more in terms of just being able to get there quicker. I think he's just like the perfect body type for that. You know, I think he's the perfect fit for that sort of ask. And I do think that it's a risk, right? It's always going to be a risk because you don't know if these guys will still have another gear to get to develop. But with what you see athletically, I mean, the sky's the limit in terms of what he can do. So, I mean, I've seen enough to say, like, I understand the vision of you get this guy to be able to just bend a little bit more and teach you a little bit better technique here on your chops and have a better straightforward path to the quarterback. You're not doing too much. I think that he can make a difference. Now, the plan for him is to play inside as well and pass rush snaps, which I don't know how good of a bull rusher he is, but he's certainly fast enough to get past some of these slower guards. And, the strength there is also, like he's tested athletically enough to make you feel comfortable that he can do that.
Yeah.
but we haven't seen him rush a lot from the true inside, like a 3-tech or a 4-eye or whatever. So I'm interested to see how that looks. The rest of the team, like you've got Osai that's done that a little bit.
Murphy, I think that's the plan.
Yeah,
like have that flexibility.
I think a lot of those guys have that flexibility on this team, so he's not gonna just be solely like on 3rd and longs being the inside. I think he's gonna have his opportunities on the outside, but I do think Shemar has the all the tools in the world. It's whether or not he can get those refined enough, and that's going to be all on the coaching staff to be able to make it work. We'll see how that plays out. The coaching staff, I can't remember the guy from Green Bay, but that's the D-line.
Jerry Montgomery.
Yeah, Montgomery. He's going to have a lot to work with. I mean, you've got Miles Murphy. You got Osai another year. You got Shemar Stewart. You got Jenkins.
Brought in Slayton, who was his guy.
Yeah, you got a lot of young guys to work with and mold into your vision. So we'll see how he juggles all that. But I have confidence that he can at least make enough of a difference to be a disruptor.
Yeah, I know the sacks weren't there in college, but this is a Texas A&M defensive line that had 3 picks in the top 2 rounds. And Shemar Turner went right at the end of the 2nd round. Nick Scorton went right outside of the top 50, picked 51 to the Panthers, and Shemar Stewart led that defensive line in pressures. That does mean something. I also think something that's important to note is Jared Verse, a player a lot of people in Bengals fandom was talking about the Bengals getting last year, ended up going to the Rams, winning Defensive Rookie of the Year. He was one of the most productive rookie edge rushers we've ever seen. He had 4.5 sacks. That's how football is changing. He won Defensive Rookie of the Year with 4.5 sacks because we know we can value, the impact an edge rusher can make on the game a little bit deeper than just the sack number. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that Shemar Stewart has more sacks this year than he did at Texas A&M.
Yeah,
I think he has 5+ sacks this year, and I think he's a really, really good player for this Bengals defense.
Yeah, the Bengals, you can look at the sack numbers; they were really bad, but the pressures, like some of these better pass rushing teams that don't have a lot of sacks, have some of the most ungodly amounts of pressures, right? That just make the quarterback uncomfortable, make a move out of the pocket. And there's not very many quarterbacks that, like Mahomes, can just run out of the pocket, throw a ball perfectly accurate down 40 yards down the field. That's just not a lot of quarterbacks in today's world.
You need a specific kind of speed to chase Lamar Jackson down twice a year.
Exactly. And I think adding just more pressure will also help Trey Hendrickson, because he had literally no pressure to work off of.
That's something we talked about on Friday. If you get those 40+ pressures from a guy like Shemar Stewart, maybe he does finish the season 2.5, 3 sacks. But if Trey Hendrickson's able to take a 12.5 sack season to a 15 sack season because of those pressures caused by Shemar Stewart, that won't necessarily be reflected in his stat sheet. But I think that's something that really makes that pick better if Trey is here this year, when Trey is here this year, because I don't think they're moving him after what we saw this weekend.
My whole grade of this draft is solely dependent on Trey Hendrickson being a Cincinnati Bengal.
Yeah.
If he's a Cincinnati Bengal and he's playing every single game next year, potentially another year after that, depending on what they do with him, this draft I think everybody's going to look back at and say this is really, really good. If he does not play, if he wants out, if he does the I'm going to retire thing again, and he doesn't suit up, no, I don't think he'll do that. But if he does do it, I think it's going to be a different sort of draft. I think you're going to look at it maybe a little bit worse than you probably come into it. So that's why I think it's like a C. I think it has an upside of a B+ and there's a downside of a C-.
All right, off the bench, presented by UDF. Again, we put the poll in the chat. How confident are you in this draft class for your Bengals? What grade would you give it? Right now, 9% of the vote gives them an A. 40% gives them a B. 32% gives the Bengals a C, with 19% going the D and the F route. I think that B and C range is pretty fair.
I think A and F are both crazy.
A and F are
just crazy picks to vote for if you're grading the Bengals draft. I don't know how you can justify it as an A if 3 out of the top 4 picks were consensus board, almost full round reaches. Even if they are great players, I think it's tough to ignore value to that degree and get an A. You also can't, even if you're the most pessimistic fan, you can't act like Shemar Stewart's an F pick.
No.
He has the potential to be phenomenal. And in the last couple of rounds of the draft, the Bengals drafted guys that'll impact the team in positions of need in week 1. So I think A is just as crazy as F. If you're at B or C, certainly his justification for it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The one criticism I keep coming across the most from just like watching the national draft coverage was, I know we talked about it last week. I was kind of underwhelmed with their free agency period. I know a lot of that, the headlines for that were soaked up by the Jamar Chase T. Higgins contract. But if it was an isolated draft after a good free agency, this draft is really, really good. But because they didn't make a lot of moves, they weren't very aggressive at all in free agency, this draft makes a lot of Bengals fans feel underwhelmed. I think a lot of Bengals fans felt we weren't very aggressive in free agency. They're putting a lot of stock into this draft. Let's go nail it. I think because you didn't add anything, because we did not add anything in free agency, I think that makes this draft feel a little underwhelming. How do you respond to those who view it from that perspective?
Yeah, and I think that is fair. I think that's why, the Bengals don't have the benefit of the doubt for most of the people in this fan base talking about the draft, talking about any kind of acquisitions. We even thought through free agency, a lot of questions asked about every signing the Bengals made, and it's because we haven't seen this front office execute to a degree that, makes us consistent contenders without people falling into their lap. I mean, I give them more credit than most do, but still at some point you have to look at it and say the success that they've had is with, 1, 5, 33, 37. Like, these are picks where you have great players falling into your lap. So it is tough to justify this front office, taking swings on players, taking, their guys that disagree with the consensus board when we've seen time and time again, not just with the Bengals, but with every team in the NFL, the consensus board knows what they're doing, at least to a degree. Certainly, there's misses in every draft class, but if you're taking a guy 50 or so spots on the consensus, below where he is on the consensus board, then you're taking a reach. And even if he turns out great, you're not getting the best value for your slot. So I think that's the frustration for the Bengals, is they didn't maximize this draft. However, they can still get, 4 or 5 starters out of this draft class. And with the high-end talent we have on this team, with the Joe Burrows, the Jamar Chases, the Logan Wilsons on defense, I think it's enough to make this team a legitimate contender this year if these guys can play to the level they drafted them to play to. And that's not Shemar Stewart being an all-pro player. That's Dylan Fairchild and Jalen Rivers being our starting guards and being better than than Alex Kappa and Cordell Volson were last year. That's Demetrius Knight being our linebacker too and being better than Jermaine Pratt was last year. That's Taj Brooks being the best second back we've had next to Chase Brown since he took over last year. So if those picks below Shemar Stewart can be immediate impact guys, fill into the slots, I think the Bengals did a good enough job to complement their star players and be a legitimate contender this year, which is what we all asked them to do going in.
Yeah.
All right, with that, you look at the players the Bengals took over the weekend. Your favorite draft pick, your favorite player that was added to the Bengals over the weekend, not undrafted free agents, just the players that were selected in the draft. Who was your favorite player that the Bengals drafted over the weekend, and who's the player that you're not the most comfortable with? Casey, we'll start with you.
I think for me it's Fairchild.
Fairchild, the favorite?
For me, yeah. I think he's my favorite just because, like I said, he was super low just because he didn't test athletically. And I think if he tests athletically, even if he's like a 70 or like a 70th percentile athlete, that he still sneaks into that third round range. So in my eyes, I don't think it's much of a reach because of those reasons. And, I mean, you got to like a guy that never gave up a sack or gave up one sack in his entire college career.
Just a casual 88 pass block rate.
Yeah, I mean, he was the best pass blocker in the class, and considering how we pass more than 70% of the time, I love a guy that can pass block. So, and he's a Georgia kid, played with Mims. Like, I like the idea of you're just building Georgia's offensive line that's been dominant for years now.
Pretty dang good.
I think that's a good mold to mold your team off of. So.
Building the defensive line worked for the Eagles.
Be careful on the streets, though.
Uber gift cards for Christmas. Yeah.
I'd probably go. I'm going to go with Barrett Carter as the pick I like the most. I think he's going to be incredible here. I really do like him. With what pick was that? The 119th. I think that's tremendous value. The pick I'm not as confident in, obviously, it's going to be Shemar Stewart, just because I don't know what he's going to be able to do. We keep saying upside, but what do you consider to be the downside? Because if he comes in next year and has one sack, I would argue it's probably not worth that pick. I could be wrong, and maybe he has infinity pressures, and maybe Trey Hendrickson uses that to have his best season of all time.
Yeah.
And I can look at it a little bit differently. But if I'm looking at a guy to replace Trey Hendrickson in terms of sacks, and I see a guy that doesn't have a lot of sacks, I'm going to be a little bit concerned. So I'm going to say Shemar would be my most nervous pick. But I love Barrett Carter.
I've got your floor. It's Miles Murphy.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. That's your floor. Your floor is we don't see him this year because he's unplayable as a rusher. So we'll see what happens. But obviously the best case scenario with Miles Murphy being a Shemar Stewart floor would be that they both get developed on the same schedule from a new defensive coordinator and Al Golden, and we have a completely new looking defense.
Yeah.
So maybe you go there. My favorite pick of the draft, to go a different direction than these guys, I think it probably is Dylan Fairchild, especially after hearing the Scott Peters stories about going down there, doing the Vrabel tactics of getting your hands on him and having a physical pro day with him and working him out. I love watching an offensive line coach do that. My favorite pick of this Bengals draft is something that I wasn't as confident that they were going to do, and it was the fact that they still took a running back. I love Taj Brooks. I've said for months that this is an amazing running back class, and it would be a mistake if the Bengals left it without taking one. After working out Zach Moss's contract, not moving on from him, and bringing in Samaje Perine, I thought that ship might have sailed, but the Bengals used their 6th-round pick on Taj Brooks. Only player in Texas Tech history, one of few players in this draft class to have multiple 1,000-yard seasons, 1,500 yards both of the last 2 years. A crazy amount of carries on his body, which is why he fell down this far in the draft. One of the best pure runners in this draft, probably the 2nd or 3rd best pass protecting back in this draft class, which is something that's really, really good to add next to Chase Brown. I think he's going to be a perfect complement to Chase Brown, and this is the same cloth we cut Chase Brown from, drafting him in the 5th round because of the miles he had on his tires coming out of Illinois, getting another very, very productive player in Taj Brooks late in this draft. I think that backfield might be the best that Joe Burrow's had in his career. I know that Joe Mixon was a really, really special player here, and I don't think Chase Brown or Taj Brooks is going to be quite to that level yet this year, but Samaje Perine being the backup running back that Super Bowl year wasn't anything special. I know he caught the wheel route against the Chiefs in the playoffs, but we all know what Samaje Perine was. Yeah. He was a guy we didn't even want on the field at the end of the Super Bowl. So I think having these two as the top 2 backs in this team is the best, backfield that we've given Joe Burrow so far in his tenure, and to do it while keeping Jamar and T. Higgins this offseason, I have a lot of optimism for this Bengals rushing attack.
One thing on tomorrow's show that we're going to dive into, because I think it ties in perfect. I know we wanted to get into this last week, but the Cincinnati Bengals passed on 61% of their play attempts last season.
Yeah.
And for all teams that had that same amount of percentage plays on the pass game, they all missed the playoffs. So you love the backfield, love the running back that they added. How is that going to change the offensive scheme and game plan of the attack for the Bengals in 2025? We're going to dive more into that on tomorrow's show, but just making a note of that. Ahead of that as far as that goes. The Bengals were also very active the second the draft ended and going to get undrafted free agents. My favorite Bengal, I know I said it had to be the draft, but my favorite Bengal was the addition that they added when the draft was done.
Yeah.
They got the steal of the draft. I don't know how to word that, the steal of the non-draft, if you will. So I'm curious your guys' thoughts on the undrafted free agents that the Bengals added and the impact that they can have, and then overall the draft as a whole. Shedeur, the ironic part about the Browns selecting Shedeur Sanders, by the way, I'm not joking. I had texted Jake. I said, I'm so over this Shedeur nonsense. Like, what is going on with this? And then I get the eye emoji response. Is this it? Is this about to happen? I had no clue what he was talking about. Very weird timing on that.
Yeah. He texted me as they traded up.
Really?
It was unbelievable.
That's incredible.
Unbelievable.
That's the day. It was that day and that time that my life changed forever.
Yeah, that's right.
Who day, baby? There you go. All right, big NFL draft headlines that did not involve the Bengals. We'll get to that, undrafted free agents, and then we'll get to the Reds to close out coming up here in a bit as well. More off the bench when we return. All right, welcome back. During the break, we were just talking about how I know a lot of people, the build of this draft was not as big of a build as I'm used to when it comes to NFL drafts. And I thought that there were some big names in the draft, but I still felt like it wasn't moving the needle the way it does for most seasons. But this draft people kept referring to it as a depth draft. And my goodness, when you talk about the names that teams were adding in the 5th, 6th, and 7th rounds, usually after the 5th round, it's just rapid fire, a bunch of names that you're just kind of, we have these picks, we have to use them. Let's see if we get lucky and find some impact players here. Not only did a lot of teams, including your Bengals, get a lot of impact players in the later rounds of the draft, there were leftover impact players when the draft was all said and done. The undrafted free agent additions that a lot of teams made, including your Bengals, were top-notch guys. I love the McLaughlin get, obviously, Alabama/Ohio State.
That's right.
That always makes our guy Jacob happy over here. How do we feel about what the Bengals did in the undrafted free agent department? The second the draft was done, they hit the ground running. I thought they got one of the biggest steals of the undrafted free agent class when it was all said and done.
Yeah, unbelievable, and it's a realm that the Bengals don't usually dance around in. Yeah. Usually when that last draft pick is made, that they're sitting on their hands and they're done for the year, but wasn't the case this year. We're very, very active in UDFA and signed a bunch of players, including Jamoy Mays, Cincinnati wide receiver, staying home in Cincinnati. But the two that really jumped off the page to me are two guys that I am very, very confident would have gotten drafted without injuries this year, and that's Seth McLaughlin and Howard Cross. Seth McLaughlin, the center for Ohio State, won the Remington Award as the best center in college football this year. Truly a special player, played at Alabama for 3 years, and then transferred up to Ohio State, won the national championship last year after getting hurt after their first 10 games. But he was the best center in college football last year, and he was a 2-year starter for Alabama before that, played in 3 college football playoffs. This is a guy that I very firmly believe is going to be the heir apparent to Ted Karras. I know a lot of people circled Matt Lee last year, the 7th-round pick for the Bengals, but Bengals didn't have a 7th-round pick this year and walked away with probably a better center prospect. The question with McLaughlin is going to be his torn ACL. Tore it after that 10th game for Ohio State, so the recovery is a big question. It might start the season on the IR, might go through the whole season on the IR, but him and his camp said that he could be ready as soon as July, which would certainly be a shock. That's about a 5-6 month recovery for a center with an ACL surgery, so that would be a surprise, but might give him a shot to make the roster and be the backup center this year. Howard Cross, on the other hand, played under Al Golden at Notre Dame, defensive lineman for the Fighting Irish. He was one of PFF's highest graded defensive linemen in 2023. So 2 seasons ago, he was projected as a first-round pick. Funny enough, the 33rd team had him going in the first round of their way too early mock draft right after last year's draft, going 1 pick before the Bengals. So we just missed out on him in the first round of a way too early mock draft, but pick him up in undrafted free agency this year. I think he's one that most people expect to make the team and be an impact player. A lot of people said that he was going to get picked in this draft by the Bengals late as an Al Golden guy to come in and run this defense. So good to get him afterwards anyway. So very, very exciting to get both of those guys and hopefully 2 guys that'll be impact players on this team.
Why did McLaughlin drop? Do you think was it just the injury?
I think it's the injury.
But if not, how
and
high do you
age
think
maybe. I think the age certainly scares some guys too. If you don't think he's going to be a day 1 starter, taking a 24-year-old center with that injury kind of compounds it to make it.
What's the
tough.
shelf life for a center in the NFL?
That's a good question. I think they're.
Sorry to put you on the spot. When you said the age, I'm like, well, does that? I mean, like, would that?
But if you're drafting a guy to not start this year, you'd rather him be 21, and then when you start him at 23, even if that shelf life is till 35 or whatever, you're getting a lot longer than a 25-year-old sitting for 2 years. So I think it's certainly a conversation we're going to have in a little bit with Shedeur Sanders. But once you deem someone not a starter, the evaluation process is far, far different. And it's not just film, and it's not just what you've seen about him, unless your owner steps in. But I think once you deem someone maybe not a starter at a certain position, the evaluation process is a lot different in terms of what traits and what film you gamble on as a developmental player. So I think that's why some of these guys fell, and I think a team like the Bengals, who are getting a win now mindset with players that are ready to compete right now, I think it's certainly a great group of guys to fall to them.
People bring it up, all the great things about Billy Price accomplished when he was in college, and look how that worked out. Well, Billy Price, when you take him in the first round, obviously it makes it more gut-wrenching when it does not work out. I mean, this is a low-risk, high-reward get I mean, it's undrafted free agent. I mean, there's always, every time you get to the playoffs, how many players step up during those playoff runs where they're the highlight, they're the little feature piece of, an undrafted free agent to making some of the biggest contributions on the Super Bowl contending team. That very well could be him. Maybe not this upcoming season, obviously as a backup, as you mentioned, but, in future seasons. Either way, this is where a lot of teams kind of get lucky in a lot of these undrafted free agent realms or whatever, and they could have potentially done that with not one but two of those additions. You said the Bengals normally don't swim in those waters?
Certainly not with the high-end guys. I mean, you sign local visits and things along those lines after the draft as UDFAs, but as soon as the draft ended, Howard Cross, Seth McLaughlin, the safety we got from Rutgers, I'm blanking on his name right now, but all three of them ranked in the top 10 to 15, depending on where you looked on what site of the available UDFAs. So the Bengals getting the top two guys on ESPN's board, Howard Cross and Seth McLaughlin, is something that we have not seen them do before. In my opinion, makes up for the Khalil Herbert trade. I mean, those are two guys I would have been very comfortable taking in the 7th round as a depth piece to sit on this roster and potentially not make the team this year, take a swing on. So I think they did a really, really good job, emphasized a really good grade on day 3 for me that I think salvaged the rest of this draft.
All right, the rest of the draft.
Yeah.
We talked, on Friday, the Ravens, they go and they do their typical Ravens thing, and they get a nice, pick, to close out the first round of Malachi Starks. They also made a couple nice additions. They went out and they pulled the trigger on Mike Green.
Yes.
Because Mike Green was another one that we were keeping an eye on. Obviously, could potentially be some legal issues that follow him around that may not make him available. And luckily the Ravens already don't have other players on the roster that they're kind of waiting to see how the legal process, plays out. How we feel about how the Ravens out of the AFC North did, because they also got Emory Jones, which I like that in the 3rd round. Obviously, it's very important for them to protect Lamar Jackson. I know we don't care about the Ravens, but I always care about the Ravens from the standpoint of everything that they do impacts the teams that you follow,
That's right.
Especially your rivals. They get Malachi Starks. They get Mike Green. Mike Green, take the off-the-field issues away. Let's say those just magically disappear. From a player standpoint, that's a first-round talent that they got in the 2nd round at the back. They didn't just get a first-round talent in the 2nd round. They got him at the back of the 2nd round. Malachi Starks / Mike Green, assuming Mike Green plays, 2 impact guys for the Ravens on what's already a pretty solid defense.
Yeah, an unbelievable haul with those 2 players. And Emory Jones, like you said, in the 3rd round, I think he certainly has that tackle flexibility, but could be one of their starting guards this year. And then you turn around to the 4th round, it's Teddy Buchanan, who we talked about on this show, as a potential Bengals target. And he's one of the most athletic linebackers in the entire class. Pick up their apparent Justin Tucker replacement and Tyler Loop later. And in the 6th round, one of Casey and I's favorite guys, Aeneas Peebles. But I think something that's, interesting to look at here is what Eric DeCosta is able to do with the Ravens. They had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 6th round picks, a 7th round pick, a 5th round pick, and then a pick in every other round as well. So they had so much draft capital, 11 picks overall, to take these swings. I'm sure not all these guys are going to make the roster, but they'll find the ones that are great, and they'll make the roster, and the ones that aren't will fall to the bottom of the bucket. So it's a great draft by the Ravens, as we've come to expect by the Ravens. But I did think one thing that was a little bit interesting after the draft, specifically after day 2, and the pick of Mike Green at 59, a lot of people saying, well, if the Ravens take Mike Green there, they have to be overly confident with his ability to play this year, completely okay with those draft concerns. I don't know if the Baltimore Ravens are the team that I'm circling as 100% okay with off-the-field concerns. Maybe they don't have the best track record there, and I'm not saying any team in the AFC North does, but they probably took Mike Green because he was overwhelmingly the best prospect on the board, and they're going to figure out a lot of those questions later. And at 59, when you're a team with not a lot of holes like the Ravens are, you take a swing like that. But it's not a swing a team like the Bengals, who needs to fill a lot of those holes, are willing to take. So I wouldn't be as confident that Mike Green got a clean bill of health coming into this draft by the Baltimore Ravens. I think if that was the case, more teams would have had it, and he wouldn't have fallen to 59. However, I do think they're in a position where they're very, very comfortable taking a swing on a guy with unbelievable upside. And kudos to their front office for putting their roster in a position where they feel comfortable doing that.
Other teams, too. How about Pittsburgh? They go and they get Will Howard.
Yeah.
They add, so they get Will Howard, and then they also get someone that I thought Cincinnati was going to be in position to get, obviously, and they add the pass rusher from Ohio State as well. Pittsburgh, I know that probably pained you for who they added in there.
Yeah, all the best things happen to the people I hate the most. It's a real shame. Jack Sawyer, Will Howard, both Pittsburgh Steelers. Could have had Shedeur, could have had the joy of rooting against him for the next 20 years in Pittsburgh, but not going to be the case. have to root against Will Howard, which will pain me every single day. Also got Cincinnati native Caleb Johnson, the running back from Iowa, which I know will hurt some Hamiltonians around here. But Derek Harmon in the first round, I think, was one of the best picks of the entire draft. And it's less because of how much I love Derek Harmon as a prospect and more because they didn't draft Shedeur Sanders. I mean, you have Cam Hayward, who's been a focal point of your defense, the leader of that team in the middle for how many years now? Well over a decade. And he's certainly on the back end of his career. And you addressed that need at pick 21 with a player that we talked about the Bengals taking at 17, not even close to being talked about as a reach in Derek Harmon, a very, very good player out of Oregon. And he's going to learn behind Cam Hayward for a year or two and probably be a stalwart in the middle of that defense for a decade himself. And, if you reach on quarterback with Shedeur Sanders, I'm of the belief that you're in the same position you were in with Kenny Pickett 2 years ago, taking a quarterback in the 20s that's not good enough to start. Now, we can have the debate about whether or not they should have taken Shedeur in the third round or the fourth round, but in the first round, taking Derek Harmon, I think, was one of the best picks of the draft, just, going against the consensus of reaching for a quarterback there and taking a player who's going to impact this team. Pittsburgh, this draft might be a perfect example of why they're 9-8 every year, but it's also a perfect example of why they're 9-8 every year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's tough to be too mad about it.
I don't think the Steelers. I think the Steelers are a well-run organization, but the best organization in the world can't overcome a lack of a quarterback.
Yeah.
And they still don't have one. I listen. No disrespect to my guy Will Howard, but I don't think Will Howard's changing the direction of that franchise.
They'll back up Rodgers.
What they need is a quarterback to come in and be a top 10 quarterback to give them a shot. If they don't have that, if you're still dealing with Will Howard or Mason Rudolph or whoever else, Kenny Pickett, whoever else you bring in, it does not matter. Actually, Kenny Pickett's on your team. That's my bad. But my point is, they can draft well all they want. They're going to be competitive like they always are. They're going to probably make the playoffs like they always do. But when it comes down to it, they're still not in a better spot today than they were at the end of last year.
Yeah, and their pride gets in there. They're a very well-run organization, but their pride gets in the way. The Steeler way. I get tired of hearing the Steeler way. I get tired of, people talked about the Patriot way. Well, the Patriot way, when you have a quarterback, you can have any way you want. We can talk about the Bengal way. If the Bengals turn it around and start winning a ton again moving forward, we can talk about the Bengal way. Well, the Bengal way is because you have a superstar quarterback in Joe Burrow, and it masks a lot of issues. The Steelers have a lot of issues, but they mask it. Or they're not able to mask it all with a great quarterback, so they win with just a lot of depth at some key pieces, which that's how they win. But they're never going to win.
What's the most famous way of all time? It's the Patriot way.
Yeah.
We found out very quickly that was the Tom Brady way.
Yeah.
I mean, he left Belichick coach for 2 years. They drafted two quarterbacks. They both stunk.
Yeah.
Cam Newton came in and ran the offense. It stunk. The insert team way is get a generational quarterback and win a bunch of games when your front office makes mistakes and he can cover it up. That's the recipe.
I want to see what they do with Watt. Watt wants paid. He wants what Myles Garrett got. And it's do you do that before you get your quarterback and all your ducks in a row? I mean, is Pittsburgh going to do that? Do you think they pull the trigger on getting Watt that contract?
I do, because I don't know how you can justify not to a fan base that will not accept a rebuild. They will not accept a rebuild in Pittsburgh. And maybe that's a fault of their own, and they'd be better off, going to that point. But I think, the Rooneys know, and Tomlin knows, and that fan base knows that's not a team that rebuilds. I mean, they're the St. Louis Cardinals of NFL football. They're not going through a full rebuild. They're going to try to do it on the fly the best they can. And now, for about a decade, that hasn't worked for them. But I also don't think, as long as they keep making the playoffs, they're going to be willing to enter a full rebuild. And maybe that's why they will be 9-8, into eternity. So maybe that, is a huge downside. But I also don't think they're ever going to go, 4 and whatever. Because it's just not 4-13, because that's just not who they are as a team and as an organization. And they're going to have to get lucky like the Ravens did. The Ravens never entered a rebuild after Joe Flacco. They just got Lamar Jackson at 32.
They were about to.
Right.
They had announced that they were going to fire
Right.
Harbaugh. They were about to embark on
And you
that
don't
rebuild.
have to when you luck into a great quarterback. So I think the way the Steelers can have success, which is why I think a lot of Steelers fans are upset about them missing on Shedeur Sanders here, or missing might be the wrong word, but not taking Shedeur Sanders at 21, is because the thought process is we're never going to be picking top 10. We're never going to be able to get that Joe Burrow, that Lamar Jackson, that Josh Allen. So we need to take a swing on someone in the 20s that might have the upside to be that guy.
Yeah.
And this was, we're all, we certainly are more Shedeur haters here in this room, and I think we both agree he's a better prospect than Kenny Pickett.
Correct.
So, if you're going to take a swing on someone in the 20s to give your team a chance to be a contender, I think Steelers fans are upset that they didn't on Shedeur Sanders, and that's just, exponentially increased by passing on him again in the third round, which I think is very hard to justify unless you know Aaron Rodgers or Kirk Cousins is coming to quarterback your team, which they have to after the way they handled this draft. So we'll see what happens. But overall, I think the Steelers did a very Steelers job.
All right, so this just came out a little bit ago. The NFL is king, no doubt about it, but 13.6 million average viewers for the first round of the NFL draft. Of course, that's more viewers than what the NBA Finals had.
Just edged out the NBA Finals.
Just edged out the NBA Finals. But NFL's king, first-round draft coverage, of course, got about 13.6 million viewers, and a lot of that had to do with the quarterback that the next team we're going to talk about ultimately ended up taking, not in the first round, but in the fifth round or whatever it was later on in the weekend. We talked about the Bengals, of course, obviously Steelers and Ravens, but the team that has everybody talking more than any other team in football right now is the job that the Cleveland Browns did over the weekend. I actually think they had a very, very, very good draft. I think it's going to be over-highlighted now by the Shedeur edition, and that's going to be all people talk about when it comes to Cleveland moving forward. Cleveland, though, take the Shedeur pick out. We're going to close it out with the Shedeur thing here in a second. I thought Cleveland had a hell of a draft. They had needs at defensive tackle, linebacker, quarterback, this, that, and the other. They also had need at running back. I don't know why that wasn't highlighted more for a team that desperately needed help in that department as well. And they add two very good running backs. I love the addition of Harold Fannin Jr., the tight end out of Bowling Green. And then, of course, Mason Graham in the first round. Consolation prize for passing on Travis Hunter, but they get an additional first-round pick next year. Very well could be in the top 15. Really unsure how the Jaguars are going to do this upcoming season. But your overall takeaways for how the Cleveland Browns did. We talked about the Bengals, the Steelers, the Ravens. What did the Browns do this weekend?
They're certainly up there for me. I think they're either my second or third favorite draft behind the New England Patriots. And a lot of that is carried on that trade back. I think that trade back was such a phenomenal move by the Cleveland Browns. Who's throwing the ball to Travis Hunter if he's going to play predominantly wide receiver like he said throughout this draft process? Joe Flacco, apparently Dylan Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders, Deshaun Watson, Kenny Pickett. Do we have any more names in that room?
Yeah.
So you got a lot of stuff to figure out before you take a big swing on a risky player that we've never seen execute what he wants to execute before. So I'm happy for Travis Hunter that he ended up in Jacksonville. I think, a young GM like James Gladstone, a young innovative coach like Liam Cohen are going to allow him to kind of try that out and see how it works. I don't know that would have been the case in Cleveland. You add Mason Graham, who it sounds like everything coming out of Berea is that he's the player they wanted all along, and you get a force in the middle of that defensive line probably for a decade. He was one of the most sure prospects in this entire class. So certainly not a bad move there to pick him up in the top 5. Carson Schwarzenegger at the top of the first round. He was a first rounder, or at the top of the second round. He was a first rounder on a lot of mock drafts. No doubt the second or third linebacker in most big boards and player rankings. Turn around, I love Quinshon Judkins, Harold Fannin, Elliot's guy. It's a shame he ends up in Cleveland, but one of the most productive college tight ends of all time. If we just eliminate that second, third round pick, it might be an A-plus draft.
Yeah, the Dylan Gabriel pick is terrible. I don't understand it, and to be quite honest, it makes even less sense with drafting Shedeur Sanders after that.
Theory.
Yeah.
Did you see the reaction of Stefanski and Andrew Berry when they drafted Shedeur?
I did.
Nothing.
I did see that. So they did explain it afterwards. They said, don't put too much into our reactions. Those aren't exactly synced up. It does seem strange. It seems strange to me that they would have done that. And to be fair, I don't think they have done. I don't think they did do that.
Coach GM picked Dylan Gabriel. This is just a theory. Picked Dylan Gabriel so that the owner can no longer step in if Shedeur kept falling to draft Shedeur.
Yeah.
Then you get to the 5th round and old Jimmy Haslam knocks on the door and says, you're taking Shedeur.
Which is fine. I think Shedeur is a better quarterback than Dylan Gabriel.
Oh, for sure.
So it's not like I'm mad at that pick. It's just so strange to waste a pick on Dylan Gabriel, or at least go over your head. Because no team drafts 2 quarterbacks like that. No team does that.
The 2012 Washington Redskins?
Yeah.
RG3 second overall, Kirk Cousins 3rd round.
All right, never mind.
With higher picks, yeah.
If you listen, I guess if you need a quarterback, I would have to go back and see the tape on
Not often, yeah.
Kirk Cousins and RG3, who I would say were pretty highly rated compared to Dylan Gabriel. But nonetheless, Dylan Gabriel certainly became, I don't want to say, out of like who I feel bad for the most of this weekend, it was certainly Dylan Gabriel, because everyone's like, I mean, this guy's so bad that we're almost picking guys to insult Shedeur. That's all the analysis we got on Dylan Gabriel. I think he's an okay quarterback, but nobody in this room or in Cleveland or in the universe believes Dylan Gabriel is going to start for the Cleveland Browns and make his impact and be a long-term starter in the NFL. Not one human being believes that. Shedeur, maybe a different story. And honestly, if they would have taken Shedeur in the 4th round with the 144th pick, and they didn't draft Dylan Gabriel, if they didn't draft Dylan Gabriel, had a different pick there, and then got Shedeur in the 4th, I think it might have been one of the best drafts I've ever seen.
Yeah, I think something that's, obviously Dylan Gabriel certainly falls on that list, the guys we feel the worst for. I think a close second, if not maybe number one, pick 145, 146, 147, 148.
Yeah.
Because, they got no airtime. None. It was just Mel Kiper screaming at the NFL for being clueless for 50 years.
Boy, Mel Kiper, man. What a bad weekend.
He's taking it on the chin as the face of just making it all about Shedeur, but let's not let any of the ESPN and pretty much all of those draft analysts off the hook either, because they all played a role in that too. That was ridiculous. Look, as far as the Dylan Gabriel pick goes, with or without Shedeur being drafted, it didn't make any sense to me. I told Jacob on Friday, I was like, at this point, you passed on the quarterback in the 1st round. I'm totally fine with that. Don't even go quarterback. You went ahead and you acquired an additional draft pick for next year's 1st round. You got Jacksonville, who, Trevor Lawrence, there's something there, right? There's something. They just haven't been able to put it all together. But they were also picking high in this year's draft with the quarterback where there's something there. And they had a good wide receiver room. And there was really no excuse for them to take the regression steps that they did. They very well could be drafting in the top 15, top 10 next year. And Cleveland very well could be drafting in the top 15, top 10 next year. They can go get any quarterback that they want next year if they truly wanted to. So it was kind of silly to take any quarterback in this year's draft. So that's why I was upset that they took Dylan Gabriel, especially in the 3rd round. I have less of a problem with the Shedeur Sanders take in the 5th round. He's dropped that far. He could possibly have a bigger impact for you than anyone else you could have potentially gotten in the 5th round at that point. I don't mind it. People are making the big storyline out of, did the ownership come in and force it upon the Browns? Possibly. But if that's the case, it doesn't matter who picked him because he very well could be your starting quarterback moving forward. He was given a 1st-round grade. Some gave him a 2nd-round grade. At this point, it doesn't matter. Can the guy play football or not? And if he goes in there, I do think you got to move on at this point from Kenny Pickett. I thought that was a weird addition to begin with. But move on from Kenny Pickett. I think you have to go in with Joe Flacco as your starter and a true quarterback competition. Let it be held between Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur to see who gets that backup spot. And if Shedeur is truly head and shoulders better than Dylan Gabriel, and it's not a matter of, who should be the backup? If Shedeur is who he's supposed to be, then go battle it out with Joe Flacco for the starting position. The bottom line is Haslam, if he didn't meddle in this, I don't mind it. From the standpoint of you're going to have a new stadium here in a few years, and if Shedeur is the guy, imagine Shedeur, and you look at the tight end, obviously you look at Quinshon Judkins, you look at Harold Fannin Jr., you look at Myles Garrett, you look at the talent that this roster already has. Cleveland might have stumbled upon something special, but we've seen this game played with them before. They've stumbled upon a couple special things in recent seasons, and they haven't been able to maximize it, make it work. Bottom line is, I'm not disappointed by it. I did not want them to take Shedeur high in the draft. They didn't. They ended up getting Shedeur. Got weapons galore on offense, and I love that the first 2 picks were defense because everyone said the offense was so bad, that's why they were bad last year. They were bad last year because the defense took major steps back. So I thought Cleveland mightily improved their roster from head to toe. I don't think it makes them head and shoulders better this upcoming season, but big picture, 2 years from now, this could be the draft that they circle and say, oh yeah, that was the turning point for them when it was all said and done.
And you think you're going to be disappointed that you don't get to be a part of that bigger picture?
Oh, absolutely.
Because you're a
it's
Bengals
okay because I
fan.
got Joey B.
That's right.
I got
That's
Joe
true.
Burrow, and I
That's
got
right,
this
we
helmet.
do.
Yeah.
Since 2020, quarterbacks drafted in the 5th round.
Okay.
Jake Fromm, Sam Howell, Clayton Tune, DTR, Sean Clifford, Jaron Hall, Spencer Rattler, Jordan Travis, now Shedeur Sanders.
And I put Shedeur in a different light than that because he's going to be viewed as a 5th-round pick, which is why it's safe for Cleveland. If he fails, they won't get all the blame for being the quarterback.
I don't even know if he can
cemetery
fail.
that
I think there's a 0% chance he gets a shot.
Oh, you don't think they're going to go through with this at all?
If he plays this year, and what's the best case scenario for Shedeur Sanders starting on the Cleveland Browns this year? Best case scenario record. 10-7?
I don't.
Best case?
Yeah,
Perfect world?
9 or 10 in that range. Yeah.
Right, not 9. Let's say 9-8. 9-8
I don't
Cleveland
think
Browns,
it's
which
that-
would be
I don't think
crazy.
it's-
Which would be crazy.
I don't think it's that high.
Then you still have 2 top 20 picks next year in a much stronger quarterback class. And I just refuse to believe the Browns are going to be okay going into the next season after that with Shedeur Sanders. Like, even the best case scenario, now that he went in the 5th round, I don't see him starting.
Then drafting him was a mistake.
That's
Because
why
that-
I don't
yeah.
think it was the front office.
Because that pressure at this point, Shedeur almost has to start because you have to know if there's anything there because the clock is ticking. You're on the clock already for next year's draft with your 2 first-round picks. Yeah, I mean, so they created a little bit of a headache. But if Shedeur pans out and then you don't have to go the quarterback route next year, now they're fine. I don't think 9 to 10 wins is that crazy. I don't think
it's not that Shedeur would be driving them to 9 to 10 wins.
Yeah.
It's basically that he can play Flacco ball and get the ball to Jerry Jeudy, and Quinshon Judkins will be a Rookie of the Year candidate, and Myles Garrett keeps having 15 sacks, and we see what happens.
They didn't go wide receiver in the draft, which means they're really high on Cedric Tillman. So am
Yeah.
I. I mean, Jerry Jeudy was perfect last year for who they are and what they need at this moment. And then they went the pass catcher route, obviously, and got Harold Fannin Jr. They're going to go the 2 tight end route, obviously, with David Njoku and him. You have Jerry Jeudy, obviously, and Cedric Tillman, and they're going to lean into that run game again and go back to their identity. They added some O-linemen in the offseason, so Cleveland's leaning back into what got them to be successful a few years ago. Casey?
So I'm just reading this tweet here. The Browns are the 11th team to draft 2 quarterbacks in 1 year in the 7-round era. It's the 5th time we've seen a team draft 2 quarterbacks outside of the first round, and it's the smallest spread between 2 quarterbacks, being 50 picks, easily beating the previous record of 100, which was originally held by Robert Griffin III and Kirk Cousins. And by the way, the list of names of the 2 quarterbacks for each of these teams here since 1994, some standout names like Achilles Smith and Scott Covington, Bengals. Jimmy Clausen, Tony Pike, UC guy. And then more recently, you think of the Robert Griffin III and Kirk Cousins, Kenny Pickett, Chris Oldukin, Drake May, and Joe Milton. Maybe there's a chance that you get to trade one of these quarterbacks.
Dylan Gabriel for a 3rd rounder, 5th rounder?
Maybe. And then, of course, the Dylan Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders is the most recent. So, I mean, I think it's crazy that they drafted them so close together. And
trading up for Shedeur.
Yeah.
I just don't think anyone anticipated Shedeur to be there at the back end. I think that's what, I don't look at this as a traditional, a team went like the Commanders or the Redskins at the time did, going to get 2 quarterbacks in the draft. I don't count Shedeur as a true 5th rounder. I don't count this as going to get 2 quarterbacks in the draft. I don't think they planned on that. I don't think they planned on that at all. I think him being back there, the reason that was such a big storyline is because nobody anticipated him being there at the back end the way that he was. And I think him still being there, I think a lot of teams on the back end of the draft were starting to kind of change and maybe scoot up in their seat a little bit to maybe try to take a chance on something. Teams that already have quarterbacks now, you said the Eagles could have potentially done it, which would have made some sense as far as that goes. It's take them in the late rounds. It's not like when they created the havoc that they did trading up to get Jalen Hurts back then. But real quick, we'll close out the radio side of this when we come back. Off the Bench, presented by UDF. Don't go anywhere. For those with us on the stream on YouTube, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, we appreciate you. We're just doing a quick tag in and tag out on radio, and then we'll pick up and resume this conversation to close out the final 19 minutes of the show here today. But that wraps it up for us on radio. Until tomorrow, this has been Off the Bench, presented by UDF. Shedeur.
Most talked about 5th round pick ever?
Shedeur. The what?
sure.
Most talked about 5th round pick ever?
I mean, easily.
I didn't see the final count.
He is the Caitlin Clark of 5th round draft picks.
Yeah. I didn't see the final count, but I know it was very, very close. Last I checked, the Browns had 2 more posts about Shedeur Sanders than they did about Mason Graham. So 2 additional posts for your 5th round pick than your 1st round pick. Last I checked. Don't have current numbers.
It's one of the crazier stories in sports.
Yeah.
I will say that. I think we all of us in this room all had the belief that Shedeur isn't a franchise-changing quarterback. We thought, he wasn't worthy of a top 10 pick. I certainly wouldn't want my franchise to take him. No one thought he was falling to 5. No one thought he was fall into the 144th pick. Nobody in the known universe. And maybe to Mel Kiper's credit, that's what he was whining about all day or all weekend long. Because it was a bit shocking saying that. And we had this debate on Box Lunch on Friday. If you don't think he's the guy early on, why would I waste my time drafting him in the second or the third? And then it's like, yeah, if you get to the fifth round and he's there, sure, let's take a shot because it doesn't really matter when we get to the fifth round. But it seems strange to me that everybody's so shocked and outraged that a guy that I would say outside of Mel Kiper Jr. and the ESPN people, outside of those guys, I would say most people thought that could he have a high ceiling in the NFL if he played well and went to the right spot? Yeah. But there's also a lot of other behind-the-scenes stuff, and I saw that people brought in all kinds of crazy arguments to justify why Shedeur wasn't taken. I think what it comes down to is meetings didn't go well.
Correct.
He didn't really test. All we had was the numbers he had at Colorado, which was specifically boosted because his father was the head coach. That offense was made to have Shedeur be a top 10 pick. And I think everybody knew that. I think if he was on a regular team with a regular coach, then I don't think his numbers look like that. I don't think his jersey's retired. I don't think he breaks every school record. But Deion was the head coach, and that's the way they wanted to go. I'm not going to say that he can't be a decent quarterback in the NFL. I'm just saying I wouldn't want my franchise to be on the shoulders of Shedeur Sanders. When coming into this draft, I think Deion and him made it very clear that if we're going to a bad organization, we might not play. We might not want to go there. It's up to us. And I think Deion, after the pick, you think he still came out and said, he doesn't play second fiddle to anybody. Well, he's like fourth fiddle on the Cleveland Browns, maybe fifth. So I don't know the exact reason as to why. I don't think it's some large conspiracy that the owners were punishing Deion Sanders. Because I think the NFL is such a win-now league. You want a quarterback. It doesn't matter how cocky they are.
You draft for your jobs.
Correct.
The GMs and head coaches in this league are drafting for their jobs. The leash on these guys to fail is not long. You don't give them, a lot of time to fail. There's no conspiracy against Shedeur Sanders. Why do we think he dropped so far? Because a bunch of people that have never worked for an NFL front office ranked him as a top 10 player in the class. There were plenty of people out there that aren't given the platform of ESPN or CBS or anything along those lines that had Shedeur Sanders ranked as a third or fourth rounder. He was probably going to go at the end of the first or the early second because of a QB premium. Once NFL general managers and coaches deemed Shedeur Sanders a backup quarterback, he becomes next to undraftable.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You don't want the personality.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't want that posse following him. You don't want the media focus following him when he's a backup quarterback on your team. That becomes a very hard pill to swallow. If you think he's going to lead you to a Super Bowl, who cares about the media?
Yeah.
That's why Shedeur Sanders fell. Shedeur Sanders fell because of what we heard about in the Giants meeting. It came out that Brian Dable sent Shedeur Sanders a part of an install playbook to go to before the Giants meeting. And then they met together, and Shedeur Sanders said he didn't want to play for the Giants, so he didn't spend a lot of time on that install playbook. You don't think coaches and GMs talk to each other?
Yeah.
Once that happens to certain teams you don't want to go to, I'm sure that conversation bleeds into other draft rooms. He didn't show you that he's a guy that if you as an NFL scout, GM, or coach thinks he's not ready to play right now, what did he show you through this process that he's willing to work to be ready to play? Nothing.
Real quick on that. See, I didn't get the vibe that there was a lot of teams that didn't believe that he could play. I think there's teams that believe he could play. There's teams that just don't want him to play for them. Because
I don't think they deemed him a starter.
Because he's an a-hole.
You would have drafted him if you think he's a starter. 100%.
I think because in today's NFL,
who cares if you're an a-hole?
In today's NFL, cocky means clicks, and you're like it's still an entertainment business. You want a guy that's going to be
worth the noise. Is your talent worth the noise?
Correct. And it's a graph of at a certain point, the noise outweighs the talent. Yeah. You don't take him anymore. And I think that's what we saw with Shedeur Sanders.
It's you want a guy like Joe. Like Joe Burrow is one of the cockiest quarterbacks in the league.
Yeah.
It works because he's fantastic. It's he's going to lead the NFL social media pages every Sunday because he's there. He's being cocky. He's awesome. It's because he dresses funny for the press conferences and all of that. If Shedeur Sanders was as good as he is cocky, it wouldn't have been a debate. It wouldn't have been a debate. He would have been
cocky,
drafted,
and there's what he's doing.
He would have been drafted high, and everybody else would have seen that. But Jacob's 1,000,000% right.
Even like Baker, I think, is a great example. People killed him for personality, and he still went one because he was a great quarterback.
If my backup punter is out there talking smack, I want him gone. Like it's because what are you talking smack
100%.
about? So and I think that's what it came down to. The tiebreaker was his cockiness. Is he a better quarterback than half the quarterbacks that were taken above him? Yeah, probably. And I don't think it's remarkably close.
Is he a better backup quarterback?
That's the whole issue here, and I don't think he is. I don't think he's gonna handle a backup role well.
Every time Shedeur Sanders in this process said, "I'm a top 5 pick. I'm not doing X. I'm not doing Y. I'm not doing Z."
That's my next point. Yep.
Because I'm a top 5 pick. I'm locked in. I said he should be out there. He should be competing at the Combine, at the Shrine Bowl, at the Senior Bowl. He should be putting film out there because the Colorado film's not that good. And what did Shedeur Sanders and Shedeur Sanders fans say the entire time? Cam Ward's sitting out. All these other great quarterbacks sat at the Combine. Why does Shedeur not get that same benefit of the doubt? Maybe because he's not as good.
Yeah.
So when Shedeur Sanders opts out of the Senior Bowl, opts out of the Shrine Bowl, opts out of the Combine, that's his prerogative. But when NFL teams opt out of Shedeur Sanders, they're all at fault, and there's some big conspiracy theory. It goes both ways. If you don't want to prove yourself, then why do they have to take a risk on you?
And at the end of the day, it goes back to Shedeur Sanders. Who the hell do you think you are? People want to bring up Deion Sanders. You're not Deion. You're Deion's kid. You're Deion's son. You haven't accomplished anything. You didn't make the playoffs. You didn't win a conference championship. You didn't make it a playoff run. You didn't win a Heisman. You didn't do absolutely anything other than be born into this world thanks to your father, Deion. That's it. That's your biggest accomplishment to this point. Look, part of me wants it to work in Cleveland. I think he'd be a hell of a story. But the problem is a lot of people, like including me, I think he got humbled a bit being taken in the 5th round. But what happens, though, let's look at it from this perspective. If you're a Browns fan and you feel like I do, when they selected him in the 5th round, well, he's been humbled a bit. So he's going to come in and have a chip on his shoulder, but for the right reasons, and he's going to, play hard, and he's going to learn that playbook, and he's going to be fully invested because he got humbled. But then what happens if he is good? What happens if he's good and he's above Cleveland? He's better than Cleveland. He's better than half the league, and he thinks he's too good to, hey, I'm not flying out to do interviews with you, for a free agency or something. He's going to make you dance for him versus the other way around. I'm not a fan of that. I think that there's still some messes coming up down the road. But, man, this was probably the biggest humbling of any athlete I've ever seen in my life. And I'm fine with it. I am happy with it. I agree with you from the perspective of, is your talent worth the noise? I looked at it as the noise was loud. That's why teams hid. But his talent's not worth the noise. At least it hasn't been proven to this point.
13-12 record at Colorado, no bowl wins. If that was 23 and whatever, that 23-2 with 2 playoff appearances, a Big 12 championship, and we weren't questioning why his number was retired, then he would have been picked with the same story going on about him. I do think, to shift to a more positive sense, someone I didn't know a lot about, someone I've only followed through the media that I think was a huge, huge winner this weekend was Shedeur Sanders. I think the way Shiloh handled himself as the big brother for Shedeur all throughout the weekend on the streams and at the draft party. And, he was in this draft as well. He wasn't someone that was projected to be picked in the 1st round or 2nd round or even 3rd or 4th, but he's a guy who's worried about his future as well. And all weekend he was, next to Shedeur. As soon as Shedeur gets picked in the 5th round, he celebrates with him and has a good time. And then after the draft, he signs his UDFA deal and then goes right back to hanging out with Shedeur. I think that's a really, really great thing to see. And, I didn't know a lot about Shiloh. I kind of put him in, the same bucket as a, Colorado Shedeur hater as, discarding that. But I think he and really Shedeur as well handled this whole process about as well as you can ask for throughout this weekend.
Media's going to let him off the hook, though.
For sure.
Because if the Browns move on from him or he never gets signed again, it'll be the league blackballed him, and that's why.
Yep.
And heaven forbid there'll just be some accountability. People are like, people don't like him because he's too confident. That's not. You have to be a little bit more self-aware. I think that's his biggest flaw. He's just not self-aware.
For
It's
sure.
not that he's cocky. It's that he's not self-aware. Because if he was self-aware, if he was more self-aware, he wouldn't be as cocky as he is.
Correct.
Because Shiloh is not as cocky as Shedeur, but he's more self-aware.
Yeah.
He knows I'm not good enough to be like this. The problem is that, and by the way, too, when people like to do the whole, is football his number one priority? Do you think football is Shedeur's number one priority?
I don't know how quickly I can find the clip, but there's the clip of him and Cam Ward working out this summer at SMU Stadium, and Shedeur Sanders asked Cam Ward, when are you hopping on the Perfect Timing remix? When are we recording the song? And Cam Ward said, When you look up Cam Ward, it says American football player. And that is the best response I've ever heard to a question like that, and that's why one guy went first overall and one guy went 144.
The draft was fun.
It gave us all something to talk about. It certainly gave us all something to talk about, which into the third day of the NFL draft, you don't really have like a massive storyline like this. So that was cool. I thought that was fun. And for what it's worth, I think him being taken 144th overall, I think that helps his career more than being taken third overall.
100%.
So I think there's a better than not chance that it would work out for him now, opposed to being drafted as the starting quarterback of whoever in the top, top 12 picks. Because I do think there is like, okay, maybe I'm not as good as I am. Let's work to be better.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what it is.
One other player that, just to quickly highlight, that falls in that bucket for me was Chicago's second-round pick, Luther Burden. He was the number one recruit at wide receiver out of high school, had an unbelievable 2023, led the SEC in receiving yards, and then turned around in 2024 and barely broke 800 yards.
Yeah.
There was a lot of reports about character concerns. He was a first-round prospect, not showing up to practice, not being a vocal leader, everything along those lines. He falls out of the first round, and he posts, as a lot of prospects do, but he posts a picture on his Instagram story in the Mizzou workout facility at 1 a.m. or 12:30 a.m. or whatever, saying, chip on my shoulder, prove these guys wrong type of thing. And usually that's just something I throw out. But for a guy like Luther Burden, who is such an unbelievable recruit, and we've seen those flashes of greatness, if this is a chip on his shoulder that's going to get rid of those character concerns and have him work to be the player he was in 2023, the Bears might just have added a Keenan Allen replacement that's 3 times as good in terms of at this point in Keenan Allen's career. And you go Luther Burden, Colston Loveland, DJ Moore, Roma Dunze. Caleb Williams has a hell of a lot of options there. And Ben Johnson, one of the most creative play callers in the league, certainly gets a great wide receiver 3. So that could be a really, really exciting pick, too, that fell down the boards.
Casey, I think Elliot said it in the group, but of all the trolling that was done on social media over the weekend, I don't even know if this was technically a troll, but KFC stepped up to the plate and they hit a home run. And their response, was this to Shedeur or was this to Dion?
I believe this was...
I think it was to Dion.
No,
either way.
I don't think so. I think it was to...
Oh, it was to Shedeur. Okay.
I think it was to Shedeur.
Yeah, so KFC on the old social media machine, on the old X machine. If we have it up, we'll throw her up there. But, yeah, KFC tweeted to Shedeur Sanders that the Colonel was rejected over 1,000 times before finally landing our famous original recipe. Sometimes all a Sanders needs is a little time to cook. Congrats, Shedeur. So there you go. With the response of the weekend. Doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, good stuff.
I'd feel a lot better. I'd feel a lot better if KFC tweeted that at me. So it was inspirational and it worked.
All right. Anything else as we close it out today?
Was there anything else that you would have liked to see the Bengals do that they didn't do?
Well,
what was
safety, DB?
Safety?
Yeah, there's still time for them to do it because there's Justin Simmons, Julian Blackmon's out there, Asante Samuel Jr. is out there. Lots of free agents that I would be certainly happy to have come in here.
Draft looks a lot better if they use round 7 and 8 to sign some NFL-proven talent and free agency to address the needs that they missed, right?
Exactly, yeah. But the likelihood of that happening without getting Trey done, we'll see.
I do think something that could crack that door open for another external signing or maybe a couple. You know how these things go. You just push the boulder down the hill and you start getting a bunch of them. But they're going to have to do something with Jermaine Pratt. Right? Whether it is moving him or if it's cutting him, they have to get that taken care of sooner rather than later. And that's a big enough influx of cash that maybe you do use that to sign someone else. So Trey obviously is the one we have to watch. He's the one, forcing how they operate this summer basically with that big question mark looming. But I really, really do think that once they move Jermaine Pratt, it might crack that door open again for another external addition, probably a safety.
All right, good stuff. I will have more of this on tomorrow's show, but we're wrapping it up here today. The Reds got the Cardinals now. They just swept the Rockies. We'll have more on the Reds on tomorrow's show as well. But until tomorrow, this has been Off the Bench, presented by UDL.